Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to 3 for 1 Sky Fantasy Podcast from Fantasy Football Hub. With Paul away on a nice winter break, we take the opportunity to invite a legend of the game on, who is currently flying high at 25th overall, or 25th for the minute. It's absolutely great to catch up with you Luke. How are things going?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. Not too bad. I've been looking forward to this. We've sort of arranged it for a little while. Been sweating away at work. Got home, sorted out the kids. Gone on to. Have you ever heard of Chris Dingle? Is that a thing in Wales? Are you in Wales these days?
I am in Wales. I'm in South Wales. Chris Dingle. What is that? What's that got to do with?
No, Chris Dingle. I think I got that right.
I
It's like I thought it was a combination of Jingle Bells and Christ, and they were trying to be funky, but it's apparently some sort of orange candle that you've got to watch your kids do in church. So I learned something today, and that was a fun experience for me. But here I am, ready to go.
I thought you mentioned Chris Dingle. I thought he was one of the family off Emmerdale or something. But no, I haven't. But thanks for that, mate. That'll be something which our chat absolutely love, because they're talking. There's a lot of chat. They're all about tomato ketchup in the fridge, brown sauce in the cupboard, and all this sort of stuff. They absolutely love it. Be asking you a few questions later, mate. It's not this is a Sky podcast, but we don't actually talk about Sky. We talk about condiments for the next kind of half an hour or 45 minutes, if that's okay. Anyway,
I'm all in, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, you're all here for that. Many congratulations on your fantastic season so far. We will talk a bit about that later, Luke, if you don't mind. We've had lots and lots of questions off everyone about that, but on everyone's lips are questions around Bournemouth and Luton. Obviously, first, pass on our best wishes to Tom Lockyer, his family and friends. The latest yesterday was the news was really positive, so hopefully it continues in that same vein. Impact on Sky Fantasy is Sky released a statement this morning on their social media, for those who haven't seen it, saying points for Gameweek 19 will not be finalised until after the Crystal Palace versus Brighton game on Thursday, the 21st of December, which is the final game in this game week. In regards to Bournemouth versus Luton, we won't make any decision until we know more about the fixture will be settled or replayed. Now, I know you've got a bit of an update for us on this, but firstly, what were your kind of initial thoughts on how Sky would deal with this, and your thoughts on how it should be dealt with, I suppose, as well?
Yeah, I mean, for disclosure, I've got Solanke in one of my teams and not in the other. Not that I think it should impact, but clearly people always think that it might do, and some people may be sort of led by who they own and who they don't. But so it benefits me for the points to stay in. It wasn't my captain, but you know the points would be good. I think he was on 9, wasn't he? Shooting and then
he was
shooting bonus and a goal.
Team captain, yeah.
Yeah, but the bottom line for me is if the game is abandoned, which, you know, for all intensive purposes, it is currently, unless they come to some sort of ruling that they're going to agree to a 1-1 draw or something like that, which I believe they can do. You know, if it continues to be abandoned, then that is chalk from the records and the game goes. And that means that we lose the points. It means if it was your captain, it's tough luck. Like I say, it wouldn't be good for me, but I think that's the logical thing to do. Because, you know, end of the day, the game didn't take place. And I think we were discussing just beforehand, it's kind of similar, I guess, to like there's a 12:30 game and you captain someone at 3 and they just haven't turned up. You just have to almost eradicate it from your mind that, you know, you saw him score a goal and the match happened, or there was a bomb scare and the game got called off, or COVID shuts it down 2 hours. Like it, you know, it feels worse because obviously you saw the guy play and you saw him score a goal, but you know, it's chalk for the record from all intensive purposes, isn't it? And then they'll play it again, presumably at some other point. So if that's the conclusion they come to, which I imagine they do, I think they're all waiting because probably, you know, there's a chance, maybe a slim chance they say this is 1-1, or they say, I think the toughest situation would be, right, the game's happening on Wednesday, for example. Yeah. What are they going to do then? Are they going to discount the first game or the second game? So I don't think you can include both, because I think that would make it probably even more unfair, because you get almost double players that no one planned for, and then you probably have to bring in a captain. You probably have to bring Solanke in and captain him if you haven't got him, and it would be a nightmare. So I don't know. I guess they're kind of waiting for that, but yeah, I discussed it a bit, like I say, with the people who run Sky, because I've always helped out Sky in the past with prices and all sorts of stuff, and you know, it isn't 100% confirmed, but that was the general vibe I was getting from them. Is obviously they're going to wait for news, but if there's no news and they're running on to the new deadlines, then probably they'll end up just, you know, canning it all, the same as what Telegraph have done. Ultimately, I think FPL will probably do that as well, because the few examples we have, I think there was an example from FPL in like 2008 or something like that, where a game got abandoned, and that's what happened then. I just think that's most likely to happen, right? They can almost get chalk from the record. So I do appreciate there's some people that say in the chat, and I saw on Twitter, this is a game within a game, so the game can do what they want. I get that. They could do that. But I think for them, you have to remember it makes it very easy for them just to run with what other people are doing. You know, if Premier League are abandoning it, we go, well, Premier League have abandoned it. You then not make any, potentially biased decision, if you know what I mean, by then changing that. You've just gone with what the bosses are doing. I mean, Sky does that anyway, right? Opta do all their assists and everything. They just brush their hands of it, essentially. So
I think as well, it's not just only about doing what everyone else is doing. It's the most logical and sensible thing to do, regardless, isn't it? It makes absolute sense in terms of the integrity of the game, and we've seen a lot on Twitter and stuff. Obviously, kind of a lot more FPL say he should keep his points and stuff. I wonder what they'd be saying if he'd have been sent off in the second minute, just as an example, and they were waiting for a kind of -2. I think we take the kind of emotion out of it, and just for context, it's really important to say here we're just talking about fantasy here, right? We're talking about fantasy points and kind of nothing else. But if the game's abandoned and going to be replayed, it's fairly obvious, and I'm really glad that. I've just been talking about for the last hour or so on Green Arrow with Adam and Rich, and we're kind of all of the same opinion for FPL. And I'm glad that we got a sensible take here, and it also sounds like Sky are taking a very sensible approach, which is obviously really, really tough luck. There's no getting away from it, right? It's incredibly tough luck on managers who made a really good move in taking out Haaland for Solanke. They waited, they saved their transfers. It was a fantastic move into, it would have been a minimum of 18 points. Who's to say he wouldn't have gone on and scored more as well, right? But as you said, you're absolutely right. We've seen it for, years with different things. Snow, the kind of bomb scare with Man United a few seasons ago on was it the last game of the season or last but one game?
Yeah, they replayed it afterwards.
And they replayed that on the following Wednesday. I think there was like a waterlogged pitch, as you say, in 2006 or something, and it all just abandoned and replayed. So yeah, I think in the scenario you've laid out, unless they say it's a 1-1 draw, unless they play it before the end of the game week, which I think both is incredibly unlikely. Since both Bournemouth and Luton, neither are in Europe. There's plenty of time to replay the match in the future. I think the integrity of the game is pretty unfair if players get the opportunity to score off them twice, even though in all fairness we'll have had the overhaul, things will have changed. But yeah, I think you're right, and I think it's really sensible. So thanks for doing that for us, Luke.
No worries, man. I think the perfect scenario would be that they, for us as fantasy anyway, would be that they just say it was a 1-1 draw and it stays as it is, and then no one can argue any different, right? That would be ideal. But whether they vote for that, who knows, right? Who knows what they're up to?
Yeah, but thanks for the insider scoop there, Luke, and the exclusive. Really. Appreciate that. Looking ahead to the festive fixtures, you texted me a few hours ago saying glad to come on. Not much to talk about because obviously we're kind of approaching the overhaul pretty quickly, and lots of teams have only got 2 or 3 matches left. I think you made a really good point. I kind of normally ask Paul at this juncture, what are you looking forward to in the next 2 or 3 weeks? Are there any opportunities for any kind of gains or opportunities for forward thinking transfers? But at the moment you say it's kind of like firefighting. You just want to get on your hands and knees over the line to overhaul, I think, by the sound of it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone else has been as affected as me, but we had all this period of talking about we're going to sit on our hands and try and keep as many transfers to the overhaul, and I was very much behind that. But if anything, I probably used more transfers in the past few weeks. And I think you were saying on one of the episodes I watched that there was no doubt we would end up using more transfers than we thought. I didn't think it would be this many. I mean, the injury levels, I've got Shah in my team who got injured. I bought Sanchez in at the time that made sense. Wow. He got injured in the very first game. That was in both teams. I actually went back through, and I think there's a question about how lucky my season has, and there's no doubt I've had luck. But I did it in a little group chat I'm in about how many transfers I've used this season based purely on just injuries and suspensions. And that isn't removing someone just if they're going to miss one game or something like that. It's if they've been out for a sustained period for either a red card or an injury. Now, granted, a lot of those have been based on either Rodri or Dunk, who probably cost me about 10% of my transfers at this point, both of them. But 17 I've counted throughout the season have been exclusively used on injuries or suspensions on my team. So, in terms of tactical stuff, there's been a few, but, for example, the Sanchez in for Fleckham was a tactical one, and it was instantly killed the second it happened. So Yeah, I think I've had quite bad luck compared to some people on injuries even. But there was some around me that in the discussion in the group chat, they all were around 15, 16. I'd advise everyone to go back and have a look how many transfers were probably used on injury and suspension. I've been quite a lot this season, it feels like anyway. And I'm really glad that Sky actually upped the transfer count because we used to have 30 once upon a time, and then it went to 40, and now it's 50. And even that doesn't feel like too many these days because it goes so quickly.
Just in terms of levels of transfers used against last year, I know it's fairly obvious that injuries and suspensions have played a massive part. We've definitely, as a group of FPL managers, a gaggle. We definitely need a collective noun for a group of managers. Like a gaggle will do for now. Yeah. We need something like that. But it definitely
block of fantasy managers. That works.
Mate, now you're talking. A block of fantasy managers, superb.
No, flock.
Oh,
flock.
I thought you said a block. I prefer a block because that's more kind of
you could go for that.
Fantasy related. Flock or block?
I was going for alliteration. The F and F.
See, it's like okay. But yeah, it seems that we've definitely used a lot more. It feels like the kind of average a bunch, an engaged managers somewhere between sort of early to mid 30s potentially, sort of like 34, 35, which is higher than me. I'm guessing it's higher than you if you've used 17 transfers on kind of hygiene transfers. But
you don't have to be a genius at maths to work that out yet. I've used more.
But just in terms of the overhaul and stuff, how do you feel the second half is going to go? Because I'm the same as you. I think I'm down to 31 now. Maybe I've got another one definitely planned. If assuming Haaland comes back, I think I'm going to do that Haaland move back for that Sheffield United match. But that's almost half transfers used, and we haven't been able to take advantage of any fixture swings or any pylons yet at all. And that's what we normally save more back for. How do you think that will affect kind of our overhaul plan? Do you think it's going to be just a scrape by season, or will there be opportunities to really attack the fixtures?
I'm sure there will be, and obviously those who've got more transfers, this is where it's their time to shine. I think when I looked at an overhaul team, I don't know if you do this, but you've kind of got like almost three teams I make in my head. I've almost got a team where I think, well, this is kind of like the perfect team if I completely ignored fixtures and I picked the 11 best players I'd actually want and ignore captain days and everything. I think that team looks really good. And to be fair, it's probably not too dissimilar to the teams we've got at the moment, probably very, very close. And then I almost pick a team and think, right, this is one with the fixtures and the captain days taken into account. So maybe I've got someone to take advantage of a few single days that we've got. And then I almost have a third team in my head where I think, well, you know what? There's a team where I could actually load up massively in a certain area, like a back three or a back four from a certain team, and then go for it. I think Arsenal, for example, straight after the overhaul, when I was looking at it, I think you could maybe very easily look at a team with, say, Raya, Zinchenko, Gabriel, and Saliba all in your team. And I think it could do quite well for a little period, the way the fixtures have fallen for Arsenal. And they're the best defence in the league. And they are very close to passing and stuff. I know it hasn't gone that well for Arsenal in terms of the actual clean sheets they've got, but we'll know that, what's happened in the past doesn't necessarily dictate what's going to happen in the future, and their stats are the best. But I think if you look at their fixtures straight back, I do think they're quite good. Maybe you could start with a few more than what you probably think was, ideal, and then sort of whittle your way back from them by introducing the likes of Son and Salah. So, we know they're going to be at AFCON and the Asia Cup, right? So you could start heavy on Arsenal and then filter them back in for Son and Salah over a couple. I think that works pretty well. But I haven't looked too much into it because, we don't have to look into it, do we, until it actually becomes that point. And obviously we have to work with the latest information at that point. So, yeah, that's probably what I'll probably look to do. But like I just discussed, planning too many tactical transfers straight out the bat is probably something I'll look to limit as much as I can just because of the way the season's gone so far.
Ian was on Planet FPL's pods last week and said, he's going to have a bit of a plan for Salah and Son. I don't think we've ever had an overhaul, have we? I can't remember in living memory where we've potentially had to hold back so much money for two such high-profile, expensive players. Maybe one, but definitely not two. It's going to be really interesting, really tough. Especially as I say, it's not like we're going into the overhaul with 35 plus transfers, and you can afford to make a couple of luxury or kind of smart ones to maneuver your team around to kind of get them in. It's going to be incredibly tough, and I feel like, and obviously you don't know this until the time, but I do feel like the players like yourself, I think this kind of season suits you now, who've had an incredibly good start. I don't know how many points ahead of me you are. I'm guessing probably over 100, 150. but with the limited amount of transfers that we're all going to have, be it, probably say 30, even that is, need to make back. Sorry, my my quick maths isn't the best, but if I've only got like 5, even 10 transfers on you, and you're 150 points ahead of me, I need to make back 15 points on every single one of those transfers, which can be really tough. So I think that it benefits you that the transfer count is low, and that we're going to have this chaos with planned transfers in as well, because that immediately kind of knocks out a couple. But isn't it funny how every season is different? We like to think like, what's the ideal way to play a certain fantasy game, but every season is so different, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think you're right. Points on the board are important because we can't guarantee our transfers will even get you points. I mean, I've got a pretty good example right now where, I mean, the best way in this game to guarantee a transfer pretty much getting you points is if a player is out injured or suspended. And that's why a lot of my transfers are used on them, right? If the player's not playing at all, when you bring someone else in, even if they're utterly useless, they are probably going to gain points on that player. Like, that's pretty much guaranteed. However, there are instances, for example, Haaland got injured and I actually have brought Alvarez in and captained him for both games. Now, Alvarez has done absolutely nothing in both those games, and he's still played, but that's actually cost me points and a transfer now, because my captain would have been Palmer this week, or Solanke, who both got points. Now, Palmer or Solanke, obviously, depending on what happens, Solanke would have got me more points. And the week before as well, Alvarez blanked, and I can't remember who would have been my captain, but it would have been someone else who would have got me a load more points as well. So sometimes even a transfer that looks amazing on paper, you got the striker for Man City on penalties that no one else will probably have as your captain in a couple of differential days, ends up costing you points. So you cannot guarantee that they will get that. So yeah, points on the board are important, but obviously there's a point where you have to make sure you've got enough to react to, like I just said, the injuries and suspensions. That's the main thing. If a player's out and then you can't replace them and they miss 5 or 6 games, that's obviously going to end up costing you a lot of points in the end.
It's incredible how many times it happens. I wish Sky would let you look at your start 11 points throughout the season. Years ago in Telegraph, they used to have like a start 11 cup, and it basically it tracked your points from your game week 1 team all season. And I'm not fibbing. It got to November one season, I'd used 20 of my allotted 40 transfers, and I was on, say, I don't know, 560 points, say, out of my 20 transfers. I had a reasonable rank. I looked back, this is the first time in the season I'd looked back at my starting 11 team, and my starting 11 team had outscored my team that I'd used 20 transfers on. Would you believe? But it is incredible how it happens. And if we go back and rewind through to some of the moves, like I took Saliba out for someone in hindsight, obviously I think I put Saliba out for Ruben Diaz. If I hadn't have made that, I'd probably be about 20-25 points up, plus a transfer in hand, plus I did another transfer to get him back. And it's unbelievable how many times those things happen. And this is why we preach just patience with players, isn't it?
I've just remembered who it was now. It was Son, by the way, versus Newcastle would have been my captain if it wasn't for Alvarez. So it would have been Son captain and Palmer captain probably. So I don't know how many points they've scored between them, but I got Alvarez for 2 blanks instead at a cost of a transfer. I'd rather have Haaland sat on my team now, because then I'll probably be able to buy him back. So it might be 2 transfers for less points. It happens a lot. Incredible. It doesn't mean it's the default. We always remember the bad ones, right? There's plenty of times where transfers will obviously net you a lot of points, but the point is you can just never guarantee it.
Tim says a chaos of fantasy managers as a collective now, and I quite like that.
I like that. Yeah, that's decent.
So, not a lot. Let's just crawl through to overhaul. I'm assuming if you've got Alvarez, you haven't got Haaland. So I don't want to be specific. On your team is such a good point. Have you got plans to get Haaland back if he plays against Everton, or just a Sheffield United match?
Maybe. I mean, I don't really think he'll be back, to be honest. Okay. Maybe he is. But I was working off the assumption he probably won't be back. Obviously I'm quite into my City, and the information I was given that it was looking very ropey from the very start, that he would ever be back for that point. Pep's always quite positive in terms of the injury news he gives to the press. But I wasn't sure he'll be back. But I have the plan in place because I have Trippier in my team, and Trippier was always going to be a potential make weight because we thought the Man City Brentford game would also get added on potentially before overhaul. And if you look at Newcastle's fixtures, they just go bad just at that point where you can almost do a 3-for-1 for City. But now the 3-to-1's probably gone. But the way it falls anyway, I can now move Trippier to Haaland whenever he's back. That could either be for the Everton game or for the Sheffield game. So if he is back and looking like he's fully fit and going to play, then there's still a debate whether it's 100% worth it, because obviously I can captain other people, but Haaland at home to Sheffield United is pretty damn scary, I would suggest. So yeah, that's certainly there if I need to do it, and I'm confident on his minutes. So that's kind of the loose plan.
We chatted briefly last week, Paul and I, because I said if Haaland started against Crystal Palace, I think I was pretty convinced that I would have made a transfer to get Haaland back, just because of the position we're in at the moment. Like Haaland and Salah are probably the two players who can bang and put you to bed, right? In terms of if you're not on them, regardless of, I think the ownership went down to 58% in the top 1,000, which is still reasonably high. I think if Haaland started, I think it would have gone back up again to potentially 70%. If he'd have banged a couple of goals in there, my thinking was, I don't care about my transfer count. I don't want to drop off 30, 40 points just before the overhaul. Like my rank now is 1.6k, which it's not pulling up trees, but I'm reasonably happy with it. But I wouldn't want to drop back to 4 or 5k a week before the overhaul. I mean, what a down over Christmas. So I think I would have brought him back if he'd have played. Obviously, with the fact that he then played Everton and Sheffield United, he would have definitely been the captain of Sheffield United regardless. Is that something you would have done? I know you probably had a bit more kind of insight than us, but would you have brought Haaland back on Saturday or no?
I think if he was fit and starting from that point, I probably would have, because again, I had Trippier to make way and Trippier was banned. So for me, it'd be very easy, Yeah, I would have missed out on Luton away, but I mean, there's no guarantee he gets points in that game anyway. So it'd be very simple for me. So yeah, that was always the plan. It's basically Trippier's the make way. And if he doesn't turn up, then I just keep Trippier on my team, and that's where I am. But for other people, I think, yeah, I mean, I'm not someone who gets affected by the ownership of players and stuff like that to the point where I feel like I have to have them because other people have got them. If I think I've got an alternative who can do just as well, then I'll do that. But in the case of Haaland, it's not about the ownership. It's just simply because those are very good games and he's a very good player. So I probably would sort of have looked to get him in some way. But I wouldn't have done it where it's like, mass surgery. I need to make 2, 3 or anything like that.
If it was only the one, I think, one.
Yeah, if it made sense, then I would do it. Simple as that, really.
Let's have a look at the next week or two, if you don't mind. The coming game week 20 stretches over quite a period, actually, all the way through to the 28th of December. So let's have a quick look day by day. We've had some questions as well about a few of the matches. Thursday, 21st, Palace home to Brighton, 8 o'clock. Obviously, we can see the lineups. Been a lot of chatting last week or two about Dunk and Gross. I've held on to Dunk. I think really, really fortunate. I think that I'm hopefully just going to get a game out of him. I'd take 5 points probably now, to be honest, just the way they're playing. A lot of brought in Gross. We've had some questions as well. If you haven't done either and you've currently got no one, what would you do in this game? So what's your thoughts on this match?
Yeah, to be honest, I would get Gross in this situation, but it depends whether you've got coverage for that West Ham game. Because they've also got a single, haven't they? I'm presuming on Thursday the 28th.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm presuming on Thursday the 28th of December, where it's Brighton versus Spurs and Arsenal versus West Ham, people will have coverage for that game. So they wouldn't need a Brighton player.
It's Tuesday the 2nd of January. It's the final game before the overhaul. West Ham and Brighton. Yeah, sorry, yeah.
But for that one, if you're sat there with Bowen, then I don't think you need to get Gross. That's my point.
Yeah, point.
I think if you don't have anyone for that game, then getting Gross in, you're not only getting the extra game this week because obviously it's the last game of the game week. You're then also getting him as a captain here, and you're getting him as a captain on the 2nd of January. So to me, it's a total no-brainer to get Gross in this situation. I like Dunk too, but he's on 4 yellows, right? Yeah. So there's no reason you would go Dunk. You just go Gross.
Yeah.
And Gross is one of the best picks in Sky. I think it's taken people a long time to realise that. It's probably a big part of why my season's gone pretty damn well is I was on Gross pretty early. He's been a huge part. In fact, most weeks I look at my team and not many people have done anything, and Gross is sat there with 10 points somehow. Wow. Even at fullback, he's just been such a good pick.
Friday, 22nd, Villa, Sheffield United. I think Watkins' ownership in the top 1k is incredibly high. Anything else to shout out here apart from Watkins captain?
Nah, it's Watkins captain all day, isn't it? There's no reason Watkins should not be in everyone's team. If he's not, then I think a defender's fine. But yeah.
Yeah, home to Sheffield United, and they've also got home to Burnley on Saturday, the 30th as well, which is looking at it. If Haaland isn't back for that game, that potentially be the best captaincy option on that day as well, because Liverpool and Spurs don't play that day. So if you're not on Watkins, I would personally just get on Watkins regardless. Though, like I say, most are on now, aren't they? Saturday 23rd, we see the lineups for West Ham and Man United. Then it's Fulham, Burnley, Luton, Newcastle, Forest, Bournemouth, Spurs, Everton, Liverpool, and Arsenal. First glance, well, I don't know. I see there's a few options here and there. You could go for a Newcastle defender, maybe Trippier. I didn't realise. I saw a stat this week on the TV, so I was kind of flicking through Sky Sports that I think Trippier has made the second or maybe the first. He's in the top 3 for passes made this season, which really surprised me. In all the league, I'm sure he was.
I don't know about that. He's quite high, but
I'm sure I saw he was really high. Like I'm almost sure he's like in the top 3. Maybe 4.
I'm looking. No, he's not. I'm looking at it in front of me. He's got 961 completed passes, and Dunk's got 1,367, for example.
Maybe attempted passes potentially. It was definitely something along those lines.
He's got the 12th most completed passes anyway, which is pretty impressive because everyone above him is, a centre back pretty much, apart from Gross. So yeah, still a lot of passes. I mean, again, that's one that I think probably Sky managers were quite slow on this season, was that Trippier was able to pick up passing bonus from fullback, certainly in the easier games. And obviously, there was that little run where Newcastle came into the good fixtures. I think after they had 6 or 7 bad fixtures to start, and then they went on a good run of fixtures and they kept cleans in all of them. So Trippier and Shah was the double up I had over that period. And I think that's probably the biggest draw. I'd say the 4 main things that have worked out really well for me this season, starting with Mbomo, who started on fire, getting Trippier and Shah a double up for the Newcastle's great run where they've churned out clean sheets and passing bonus all the time.
And assists
Shah was
as well. I think Shah's got an assist as well, hasn't he?
Yeah. I think he did even score, or was that Botman in the end? I can't remember.
Shah had the dodgy assist on the penalty, Hwang Hee-chan when he
fell over.
Him. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, and then moving to Gross quite soon. I think those things have been like the little difference that have worked out well. So yeah, I think Trippier would be a good bet versus Luton, but I still think Son would be the main captain on that day, right? Home to Everton. I know Everton are playing well, but probably Son on that day.
Not Salah against Arsenal. Definitely Son.
Maybe. I think he's fine as well, isn't he? But Arsenal, they're pretty good. Arsenal are a pretty good team.
They are pretty good. Wolves and Chelsea on Sunday the 24th. Parma's ownership was obviously grown a lot. Sanchez, that is incredibly unfortunate. I was literally kind of a coin toss in my head of Dubravka against Sanchez. And the only reason I went for Dubravka, I wouldn't say it's because of this thing, but there was an immediate 5 for 3, and I've been stung in the past where you almost try and be a bit too, a bit too clear. It was there in front of me. I had Johnston, who hadn't kept a clean sheet in 4, and I could afford to just go, straight there. I was really pissed off with Johnson, and Dubravka was playing the following evening, so there was a 5 for 3, and there was that bias that I just wanted rid of Johnston, which is why I did it. But Sanchez owners were incredibly unfortunate. That is a killer. For that match, like I say, I think the majority probably own Palmer now. Is it worth getting anyone else in? Nkunku? Do you think Nkunku would potentially look at that one, or is it a bit too early?
I wouldn't touch that. I wouldn't touch that with a barge pole personally. Just don't know about his minutes yet, do we? I think Palmer's just an easy pick. I still really like Thiago Silva. I think if he plays, he's just pretty much guaranteed for passing in that game. I mean, Chelsea have been a little bit more ropey at passing recently. It hasn't been going great. Even Silva's not made it all the time, so maybe not. But I feel like that's a game he probably would still get it in. So I think he's fine as well.
Yeah. Who did Wolves lost come through on the weekend? And was it West Ham? Wolves had looked
3-0.
Quite sharp, hadn't they, over the weeks? Obviously, they beat Spurs. They've had a good result against Man City, and they looked pretty good. But they just seem to have gone off the boil slightly at the moment, which would suit that, especially for Silva, wouldn't it? So, Boxing Day, we'll all be hungover and tired. FPL deadline 11 o'clock on Boxing Day morning. Good stuff. Newcastle Forest first up. Bournemouth, Fulham, Sheffield United, Luton, Burnley, Liverpool, Man United, and Villa. Probably Salah captain for me on this one, even though a Newcastle defender could certainly do well in this one. And you get to see the lineups. Yeah,
I mean that's I'm open to that one because I think Trippier at home to Forest is probably a pretty damn, we could almost put that down for sort of 8, 9, 10 points, couldn't you? And then maybe you get something else on top. But be hard to turn down Salah if we know he's playing. I mean, there might be some. We'll see me play, right? His salary normally does, but I guess if there's any wind that maybe gets a rest, then it'll be Trippier. Otherwise, yeah, it's Salah all day, isn't it?
So Wednesday 27th, we get to the lineups for all three games: Brentford, Wolves, Chelsea, Palace, Everton, Man City. We would have had Haaland penciled in for this one. If he starts for you, Trippier to Haaland, captain.
Yeah, that'd probably be the case. Yeah. Otherwise, I'll just leave it on. I could go Alvarez, but to be honest, I've got Thiago Silva at home to Palace. So
It's a
to me, I
decent
usually
fixture.
edge for the defenders in these sort of games most of the time. And Everton are a good side at home, so it wouldn't be a straightforward call for me. I think I might go Thiago Silva.
And yeah, I think on that one at the moment in my team, I'd only have Palmer actually, so I would probably be forced into Palmer, which again sometimes is the best thing in it. I mean, I'm sure you've had plenty of occasions before where you've been forced into something because you only play, you didn't want to. The Fulham game last year, Palhinha, Paul loves this when I think he scored and got bonus, and everyone brought in Mitrovic, and he blanked, didn't he? Do you remember that? Do you remember the match like a Friday evening or something? That was
Yeah, another example of a transfer costing points a lot of the time because you should have just left it on the captain you have. Yeah.
Yep. I'll be on Palmer that one at the moment by necessity, but yeah, some interesting options there. Thursday 19th, Thursday 28th, Brighton against Spurs, Arsenal, West Ham. Son for me there, I think. Yourself?
Probably, yeah. I mean, I've still got Saliba in my team as well. I think versus West Ham, they give up passing a
Yeah, they
lot.
do.
So
Yeah, 'cause
that could be another 10-pointer for him. So again, that's not a straightforward one for me. I don't know. But it probably would be Son, but not 100%.
So on those instances there where you mentioned you tend to err on the side of the defender in these sorts of cases, is that other than when there's like a premium forward option?
Pretty much. Like I'll nearly always want to pick the defender because they usually end up scoring more, or the Rodri over the Alvarez. Like I was kicking myself for getting Alvarez over Rodri. I was sat there for ages thinking like normally I would get Rodri, but I just thought in the occasions where you literally got the guy up front who's also on penalties, which is the case for Son, for Alvarez, and the other Salah, for example. I know he's not quite up front, but the equivalent of in his case extremely good goal scorers on penalties. I find it hard to move away from them. They're probably the only ones who end up trumping the defenders. But any other scenario, I usually go for the defender
Would
if I
you
can get away with it.
would you kick yourself more? So this is the way that both Paul and I play fantasy. It's the levels of regret. So would you have kicked yourself more? You using that Alvarez and Rodri. So the way it panned out, obviously Rodri scored more than Alvarez, and obviously you had a kind of twinge of regret there. I would definitely regretted it more if I'd have gone for Rodri and Alvarez banged in 2 goals and assists, and Rodri would have had a 5-point. I would have thought it's there in front of me. It's a gift. Why didn't I just take it? And I think that's the way I play a lot. Is what's gonna not make me lose sleep that night? Does that kind of come into your thought at all, or?
Yeah, I suppose what you're doing there is just essentially assigning a value on what you think, expected value and expected points on the players, right? And you're going, and the number that we come to is an average, and the average most of the time will go towards the striker there because although they'll get a lot of twos, they'll also hit a lot of 10s, 15s, 20s, won't they? So overall, it ends up being a little bit higher, and the average ends up being higher. Rodri is pretty much like an 8-pointer at sort of his maximum level. You would say most of the time, he could get a goal or assist. He does do that, but if he gets a full house in terms of tackles and passes, 8 points. Alvarez could get shots, which you'd expect anyway, and he starts to get close already. So I am always going to pick, the player like an Alvarez who could also get 2 penalties or a hat trick in the game in that scenario. Yeah, you're right. The reason why the defenders sort of come into the equation is because obviously they can get the clean sheets. That's why, which is the same as a goal, right? And I think in a lot of these teams, when you've got like Chelsea home to Palace, although Chelsea haven't been great at it, you'd like to think that they might be able to get a clean sheet in there, and that's like almost a goal, signed up for. Whereas goals are quite hard to come by for some strikers. I mean, and Alvarez has probably only scored about 4 or 5 goals in the Premier League this season, hasn't he? I think so far. It's not been as many as we'd have thought.
I think he
I
started.
don't think he scored that many.
He started off well, but he seems to have changed positionally slightly. I think, haven't he? And City,
He's up front now, isn't he? For now, anyway.
Yeah, City, as you know, though, with their kind of XG and just the way they're playing at the moment is not, is not kind of reflective of the last 3 or 4 seasons, is it?
Alvarez has got 4 goals for the whole season in the Premier League, which is surprising, isn't it, considering how much.
More. I think he's got 3 or so in the Champions League. I know he scored the 2 in one game in the Champions League the one week. That was the week I brought him in Dream Teams. That was quite a nice one.
He hasn't scored since game week 9 either. It's incredible.
Really?
Yeah.
We all brought him in for his easy hauls against Palace and whoever else.
Yeah, not that I let that affect me. That's irrelevant to me if he's playing up front.
Yeah. No, same, exactly that.
Yeah.
Transfers remaining. We've got an update off Sky. We had this last week. Top 5,000, 22.4 left. Top 1,000, 19.5. Top 100, 15. And top 10, just the 5 left. So you're 25th at the moment, I think, Luke. A small drop. I think you were 15th before the start of the game week. Round your position, buddy, they're probably averaging about like 8 at the moment. So you're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, I think the thing that's happening with me at the moment is the people, or the vast majority of the people around me are obviously done the classic spanking all their transfers, and their teams aren't that good. But I've not actually been, I've been judging myself compared to like the Content Creator League and other people, and having a look at it, people have been gaining on me every week for quite a while now. So I'm kind of just doing enough to stay where I am, whereas everyone's catching me up. Like you see a lot of people in the top 100 now that are names that we know. Like I'll just talk through it. Like a lot of my captains recently have just been really, really bad. It's really been the captain choices that let me down. My team's been fine, like picking up points, but my captains have been dreadful. Like for about, I'd say 3 game weeks in a row, 3 or 4 game weeks in a row now, I just can't hit the captain. And as a result, I'm just kind of staying where I am. So I'm more concerned the fact that all good players are catching me up rather than anyone else in the top 25, because, I don't know how many of those are serious players, to be honest with you.
I think we had the same on captains recently. Thinking on the weekend, I think was it Son and Salah maybe, and they just didn't. They all blanked. Saka blanked as well, didn't he? And so there hasn't been a massive haul for a while. Are you kind of happy? Well, obviously not kind of happy with that. Do you play in terms of captaincy? The kind of Paul McAnulty style of play, kind of highest owned, and just do that. Is that your sort of style, or do you more genuinely go for who you think are going to score the most points that particular day?
No, I go for, I think it's going to be the most points. The thing is that they're 9 times out of 10 also one and the same.
Yeah,
whoever's the most it usually is. The best captains in this game, I think we can all agree, are probably Salah, Haaland, and Son on any given game week. Those are probably the 3 you want to look at, and most of the time I'd have to have a very good reason not to go against them. Which is the odd games here or there. I think Arsenal's an interesting one because people have captained Saka, I think, a lot throughout the whole season, whereas I've been Saliba pretty much every time, and I think overall I'm probably done quite well out of that.
I think there was one last week where it didn't work out, didn't it? Where I think Saka scored and Saliba blanked, didn't he? But other than that, I think you're right. Saliba's been he's been the better pick, haven't he?
Yeah. And that doesn't mean that necessarily he's better. Next season, it could be different. Like you said, that's just a little bit of the luck element there, where I think they're quite relatively equal options, and I've just happened to get luckier on occasion when I've had them. There's nothing else to that, really.
In terms of overhaul, we always get asked how many transfer to overhaul, kind of rank at overhaul and stuff. What would you say were the kind of outside at the moment in terms of a rank and number of transfers left? What would you say would be the most outside rank and number of transfers left, just roughly, that someone would still have a chance of winning Sky this season? So I know it's a horrible question.
God,
I know.
Yeah, I think if you're in the top 1,000 and you've got around 30 transfers, between 25 and 30, I genuinely think you've still got a chance, because you can set your team up perfectly well. You can hit all the captains, you can get all the luck in the world, and you have enough transfers to make some tactical to cope with anything that comes your way, hopefully. So yeah, I think top 1,000 in and around it, which is probably, I think most people here were probably in and around the top 1,000 and in and around 25 to 30 transfers. I don't think you should totally give up hope. I think you can still do pretty well. I've had seasons where I've absolutely flown at the end. I've had seasons where I've dropped at the end. So I think you can do it. Where was Paul last time this year? He was quite high, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was high. I think we were hovering around like 150 with lots of transfers left. But again, it was a very different season where this year our next question is interesting off Golden Goal Fantasy Football. But last year, a lot of experienced players got off to an absolute flyer, and the leaderboard was packed really early on with a lot of the big names. I think it's taken a bit. I think it's had a while.
I was 43rd after 4 weeks last season.
Wow. Well, yeah, that's it. So I think this season is very, very different, and I think we'll see the kind of cream rise a lot, a lot later this season. Those who have held them back. You touched on earlier around the kind of players as well. Like, you've mentioned Mbeumo from the start. You've mentioned Gross. You've mentioned a few other players as well. It only takes people to set themselves up quite nicely with a few of those sorts of picks. I don't mean those specific players, but those sorts of picks which are kind of under the radar that you kind of back yourself in terms of your picks. If you can set that up and you're getting these really under the radar points every week while everyone again is using transfers, and then what happens, as happened with you, right, with Gross, people eventually catch on and use a transfer to get onto the player you're already on as well. So even though this is very much for lots of people a template sort of game, there are opportunities, aren't there, where you can pick other players. Those who've gone for Kudus, for example, over the last few have done really well, and things like that. Had a bow in. So I think there are other ways which you can these kind of under the radar picks. I don't mean kind of Hollywood picks. I mean just the picks.
Well,
that
I
are
can
on the
give.
periphery.
I think I can give a pretty good example. You said you listened to my pod with James last time I was on a few weeks ago, and he asked me for a pick that I think would go under the radar that people wouldn't pick, and I said Solanke. I think Solanke has shown 7.8 million striker, more traditionally an FPL pick, I would say, more than a Sky pick, and I mean, he hasn't set the world alight, Solanke, but he's done fine for that price, and obviously would have done fine this week if it continues to be as well. And I think he's another name actually. If you look at overhaul. That's going to have to be on our lips. I think Bournemouth's games are good. I think they've got a single straight away, and then potentially they could have a rearranged game as well. So he might be a player that a lot of us will have to move to. But you're right. If you can get on these players a little bit earlier than people, sometimes it's not foolproof. Sometimes it can fail. But another name's Pedro Porro. I don't think people got him early enough. I don't think they realised his price and how good he was. Again, I understand why, because Sky, you generally look at the centre-backs, but with Porro, he was getting tackles and he could get passes, but Spurs were so good and obviously doing the inversion, and then he's probably been boosted by a little bit of having the set pieces for Maddison, but he was a very good pick very early on as well, I think. So I think maybe being a little bit more open to looking at players like that, like the Trippiers and Porros, the fullbacks, they're not completely dead options. Like they are good options this season at least.
I think an option last year as well. I think both Paul and Niall went for McAllister really early, and it just so happened to be on the game. I think he scored 2 goals. I think it was like a free kick and a penalty or something. But again, just that. They weren't mainstream picks at all. They just identified his positioning. They'd seen the trend of his passes had started to up. He was getting decent on tackles, but probably kind of similar output to kind of Gross in terms of that. But I know they jumped on him really quickly, and I think Niall even captained him on that day and had a huge boost. So those picks are there for all of us, aren't they? In terms of just having the courage, I suppose, at times just to go for a pick and backing yourself.
I think Romero is another good example, right? People were quite slow on him, but that's probably from hang-ups because of who he is and what he's done in the past. And he's not been the most reliable. He's even been dropped out of the team. And I know he's ended up getting red cards this season and probably should arguably have more. But when Romero's been on the pitch, he's the dream. He's what you want in Sky, defenders that can get clean sheets, that get passing bonus in every game and are ridiculously cheap. They are like gold dust, pretty much what Dunk should have been, but just hasn't managed to get the clean sheets. Romero has been the Dunk this season, pretty much when he's been available.
And he's a cannonball on corners as well, and he just chucks everything into him, don't he? He loves it.
Yeah. So I genuinely think even after overhaul, you can look at a team that, you could have Porro and Romero in it. You could have 3 Arsenal defenders, 2 Spurs defenders. You could have a team heavily made up of a lot of players you probably wouldn't have anticipated at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, agree. We've had some questions in for you, Luke. Golden goal. Any advice to people having a disappointing season? So we touched on this earlier. Seems to be a fair bit of it in all formats. Historically, good managers not getting much. It's a bit crap, isn't it? Especially in this format because there's so many experienced and engaged players. It's very rare that kind of all of them will, and there's ones like yourself, and others who are doing well. But yeah, any advice for anyone who's having a bit of a disappointing season on kind of how to move forward on this year more than anything first?
Well, I mean, I've had them before as well, and it will happen to all of us at some point. And no one is invincible. A lot of it will be bad luck. You can't beat yourself up. Like I said, there's a few things there that I've done. I could have got Trippier and Porro, and they might not have got passes, and they might have been awful. And Porro could have even got dropped for Emerson Royal. And I sound like an idiot, and I'm talking hindsight. So I don't think you can beat yourself up. If they're good managers and they've been good managers over many seasons, then their time will come again. The beauty of Sky is, you're not tied to any overall rank history. It doesn't matter. Like, no one cares about that. We go again. We're all for the love of the game, really, and then obviously with the money as well as an added carrot that we can potentially win in this one. So you kind of chalk it off, really, and you just go again next season. I honestly don't think it matters. I've had seasons where I finished outside the top 1,000 despite thinking I've played really well. It happens sometimes. Like, you just carry on playing as best as you can. That's the only thing I will say for the rest of the season. I don't think you just go, oh, I'm just going to have fun now and I'll just get whoever I want, because most of the time that just results in you doing worse. You just play as well as you can and see what happens.
That's just what I was going to say. I was going to say the opposite, though. I was going to say I would go for a block, something defense, and just hope something happens. But it depends on.
Well, that could be sensible, though. I don't think that is a bad thing in this game. I think sometimes the most successful teams are the teams that have gone all in a certain area. Absolutely. Like, I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
Dave, simple goal. How has Luke's analytics-based approach affected his Sky game this year? What tools does he use, and how does he adapt them for Sky?
Yeah, this is a tricky question because I don't know if you'd seen the Content Creators League or saw that Sam Brennan, who's right up there in the Sky. I don't know if you know. Yeah, who does his Sky videos? Yeah, so he only started playing Sky last season, if I remember right, and he finished in sort of the top 30th. Now, this guy doesn't even watch football at all. He doesn't know any of the players. You can show him images of players and he doesn't recognize who they are. I've learned from players like him. There's a lot of the analytics guys, they basically just use the raw data and they assign expected value points similar to what we would do in FPL and algorithms, and they look at it and they think, oh, this player's good and this player's not. And they just do really well, and he's right up there again. And I've kind of learning off of him. So I guess it's like I'm more open now to doing things that I wouldn't have done in the past. Like this season, I actually didn't start with Haaland. I started with other players and I bought him in later because I didn't feel his fixtures were good enough to start with. And that worked out well for me. You could say that's risky. I didn't have him versus Newcastle, I think it was, when he didn't really do much. That comes to memory. I'm more open to, I think the way they structure and think of things is different to us in terms of, like, traditionally what I would do with my team, I would almost have my set glue guys, and then I'd have players in my team where I'd be happy to rotate. Do you ever have that where you kind of have your Salah, your Haaland, your Son, and then you think, oh, I've got 2 or 3 positions and I'll kind of rotate them? Whereas these guys will be very happy to take Haaland out if the other guy they're bringing in midfield, like for me when I doubled up on Shah and Trippier because the Newcastle games were good enough, because the fixture run was good enough, and they're happy to go without other players, not worry about effective ownership at all, who's got them, run with these guys for a little while because it makes sense mathematically to have them and then come back to them. So that's more what I'm learning for them, is almost to let go of any sort of traditional things that I've got or emotion that's tied to the game and just go for, this is the pure numbers. Like, these guys are probably going to be the best. Another example of that is having Thiago Silva from the start. I do think he's a player that was underlooked. 8.5 million for a player who gets over 100 passes, like similar to Romero. I know it hasn't quite worked out as well for him, but at the start he was a much better bit than Colwell playing in centre-back position. And I thought, I'm not going to get him because he's 39 years old and he might not play, but I ended up going with it because it made sense. So it's just sort of like, you've seen Moneyball, right, where they cut out all the things that you think about players. It's a bit like that, I guess. And they've helped me to do that a little bit this season, and it's worked. So I kind of follow them. It's crazy because I think that's how we've got to adapt as traditional managers. Like, we have to let go of that ego. Absolutely. And think, we are so good and we can do this and we know better. And then here comes a guy who doesn't watch football, doesn't know the players, but the maths tell him to do that. And again, he's like flying, absolutely flying. And I don't doubt that he'll go on to be one of the best players in the game. If Sky kept records, and we go from his first 2 so far, I wouldn't be a doubt if in 5-6 years he's probably the best player in the game. Like, that's how. And I think actually, as a general point, and I know you like to talk about these things, Sky is so unoptimized compared to other games. Like FPL has got 10 million people. We've been playing this game a whole lot longer. It's a lot more simple game. We have so many tools and resources that's in it. Whereas Sky, there's probably only about 200 to 300 really top managers that are basing pretty much off of a whim in their house. They don't really have much more than that to go with it apart from fixtures. So these guys are taking the game to the next level. And I think eventually we'll start to see the likes of algorithms and other things that run the game. And I can't think of another game that would be better managed by an algorithm, because literally it will look at those fixture blocks and those runs and be able to see things that you won't be able to see in terms of your transfer because you've got those static players in mind. And it'll be scary. It'll be harder and harder to win. That's the other bad thing about it.
Good stuff. Yeah, it's interesting. The Hub AI team in FPL, the Gameweek 1 team it produced, and every week, every wildcard team since, and every transfer it kind of manages itself each week. It's 70k, which at the moment is, I know you're having a superb season, but it's absolutely flying in terms of the kind of
You bite your hand off
creator,
every year for that.
and the transfers it makes, it generates it, and we all go, oh god, we've got to share this with the public, and it's beating every one of us except Will. It's beating everyone because it just, as you say, it's got this this unbiased intelligence to be able to look at things at a much deeper level, and come up with an optimal solution. We all know, right, that football is random, and there's no one sort of more cynical than me at times that looking at data to predict what's going to happen in one game. But when you're looking at a long term and looking at blocks of matches and you're looking for a long term outcome, which is what season long fantasy is all about, this is it's definitely the way forward. So yeah, it's really really interesting stuff. He also asks, what lessons have you been surprised by, and what are we all over or undervaluing? So you've mentioned obviously about these players, like you don't have to go for Haaland and that, and you're kind of taking a more mathematical approach over things like ownership and things. Is there anything else that you've done well this season that you've done a bit differently maybe?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think I've probably said most of the things that I've done differently. I mean, I've got lucky is the number one thing. There's no doubt about it. Yes, I've had all the injuries, but the players that I've got have generally scored really, really well. And I've avoided some, I guess, traps, you could say. I can't even think who they might be, but I think a lot of players have probably been quite. I mean, Saka's not really been a trap, but I think he's actually limited a lot of people in terms of, because there's a lot of money spent in midfield. I think now it's a bit easier, but I think he has caused issues for a lot of the really good managers that I've been experienced managers. Like Saka has not done bad by any means. He's probably one of the highest scoring midfielders, thing, but because he costs 10.4 million, he's kind of forced decisions, and that's kind of been a bad decision. But yeah, I don't really think there's anything else that I've really said. I've got lucky. I've been more open to taking out players that other people probably wouldn't. I've been more open to buying players that probably people wouldn't have considered. And they've done well. Like that's it. There isn't any magic rivalry. I could do the same next season and end up 30k. So yeah.
I mean, we could like talk for hours, right, on skill and luck. And I do think it's not until you've maybe had a top finish, or you've been towards the top, like at any kind of point of the season, that anyone really would openly admit or realize how lucky you have to be in terms of the things that go for you, but also the things that don't go against you as well. Have you noticed that this year, in terms of that? Obviously with Paul Lash, he was incredibly open about the insane moments which were kind of stacked odds against him, which kind of have came through. And I know you've been near the top previously as well, but are you a big sorry, what am I trying to ask? Do you think luck is there's this big thing, right? You've got to put yourself in the position to get lucky, which I completely agree with, but the luck element is massive in it.
Luck's massive, yeah. You play the game long enough, you come to realize that. It doesn't matter how good you think you are, how good you actually are, or whatever else. Luck plays a huge part in fantasy football. There is no two ways about it. Yes, in Sky, you have the opportunity to maximize it, probably more so like than FPL, because obviously you can take advantage of extra games, and plan out fixtures a little bit better. And obviously the limited transfers, I do think it's a much more skilled game in the sense that it's a very much more hands-on. So yeah, skill has undoubtedly for me got more of an influence in Sky, but luck is still the biggest number one factor as to why you'll do well. I mean, yes, a lot of those guys in the top sort of 100 right now will have used a lot of transfers, but there will be some in there that might not have used that many at all and have just got really, really lucky. Yeah, I think you touched on it there. I've done well definitely, and I've had luck. But I think the main thing that's sort of helped me out is any time I was in a situation where I was like, oh, I might get punished this week, I haven't really ended up getting punished,
Yeah.
like massively.
Yeah.
Like I would argue that probably one of my biggest punishments is these last 2 weeks where I've gone Alvarez captain and then people have gone say Son, because I mean we weren't sure Son was going to play, right? So I think I don't know if you captain Son. I think you could have captained somebody, wasn't sure he was going to play that game, and we didn't see the lineup. So to me, that's too big of a risk to captain him. So I was like, so I didn't do it. There'll have been a hell of a lot of managers that have left that on Son. He's ended up playing. He's got 17. Was it 17 points? I think doubled or something like that. So for me, it's that sort of scenario there where, the luck has probably helped out a few other people, and it's probably the unluckiest I've got in terms of punishment. Until then, I think the other one you touched on was Saka outscored Saliba quite a lot on 1 week. There's not too many others I can think of off the top of my head where I've just come away from it with a bad beat. Maybe I've lost by 2 or 3 points, but not huge beats. So I think it's avoiding those huge beats over and over and over is the main thing, rather than I'm going to chase this 3 or 4 goal haul. I captained Romero over Son for probably I didn't even own Son actually until about 12, 13 weeks in. I captained Romero over and over and over.
Oh.
And he just get 10 points every week, 10 points, or 5 if they conceded the goal. And it never really hurt me too much.
Awesome stuff. One last quick question off Johnny Glenn. It's more of a rule than it's interesting actually. One slightly more niche Luton Bournemouth scenario. Will Nakamba be suspended for their next game?
Got no idea. Why would he be suspended?
Because he was suspended for this game, but if it's abandoned, would he be suspended for their next game? I suppose he would be, would he?
Well, yeah, I'd imagine so. Yeah.
What a niche. Great question, Johnny Glenn. He's obviously got Nakamba, and he's absolutely devastated that he's missed this game now, and now he's going to miss another bloody game. That's really hard luck. We've answered the question off FPL Verbinho about the kind of players and moves in particular. Superb stuff for that. Ian Parrin, what's your favourite Christmas tipple? Do you have anything specific at Christmas, Luke, you kind of bring into the house?
You go first. I need to think.
I need to think as well. I'm not. I think in all fairness, I'm not a big drinker, though. I have noticed this week. It's non-alcohol related. I don't really have much of a drink in the house, but I have noticed that I love cheese, crackers, and chutney. I absolutely love it. But I only have it in December. Why don't I have it all year round? I have no idea. But I love it. I can't. I'm like, it's December tomorrow. I can have my cheese, I don't know.
You can go get a JP selection anytime, my man. Get that cheese.
Unbelievable. I have no idea why that is. Anyway, yeah. Yourself, do you have a Christmas kind of drink like a Bailey's is a pretty standard one, isn't it?
Oh yeah, Baileys are everywhere at Christmas. I suppose that probably ticks the box of having I don't have Baileys any other time apart from Christmas, so I guess that's the one. Yeah. I'm not a big drinker like you, to be honest. I don't really drink that much, but random ales that people have bought you, because when you're an adult male, you just end up getting given random beers from all over the place, don't you? So just whatever someone's given me.
and smelling of Lynx Africa as well.
Oh, yeah.
Really important questions now. John Maloney says Bailey's. Bobby Shearer, coffee and whiskey. That's interesting. That is an interesting one. How do you make a cup of tea, Luke? We want your method.
Is this a trick question?
No. We just want your method for how you make a cup of tea. What sequence in? It's an incredibly important question. It caused quite a stir. Excuse the pun. Quite a stir last week.
Okay, so we'll obviously mug out. I'm not just chucking it on the side. Tea bag in. Hot water, which will fill up nearly to the top. Leave the tea bag in for a little while. Take the tea bag out. Add a little bit of milk. I don't have sugar, so that's it.
Do you squeeze the tea bag to the side of the mug, or?
I try not to do that, but maybe as I take it out, I might just give it one little squeeze, maybe, and then take it out.
If 1 is white and 10 is black, what color do you have your tea?
Do you know what? I'm probably about a 5 or 6.
Quite weak then.
Slightly more white. Yeah, I like black coffee. See, I drink black coffee most of the time. I don't really have tea. Tea's more of like a treat to me.
Okay.
It's like a pudding.
What's your go-to dunk in a cup of tea, or your go-to biscuit?
I'm a picture of health these days. I don't have tea and biscuits. What do I have? I'll just
piece
have a
of
rich
celery
tea.
by the sound of it. Rich tea. Mine's a ginger nut. Tomato sauce in the fridge or the cupboard?
Mine's in the fridge, but I don't really like ketchup.
The picture of health. Have you got, have you got any strange habits in the house that you didn't consider?
Careful.
You didn't consider strange until you noticed in kind of later life, something you eat or some kind of routine or something you've got, hung up on the wall or something or like that at all. No. I'll give you mine one. I really enjoy eating baked beans out straight from the tin with a little spoon.
Like at uni.
And I also had listen to this one now. Listen to this one. My mother's from Yorkshire. And growing up,
I apologise.
Thank you. And growing up, I used to have pancakes on Pancake Day covered in gravy, which to me was the absolute norm until I realised going into school when I mentioned it. I got absolutely hounded for that, as you can imagine.
That's mental, yeah. That's absolutely mental. You don't mix sweet and savoury like that. I don't do that at all. Not a fan of that. I eat tuna straight out of the can.
Okay.
100%.
I'll give you that.
If I'm hungry, I'll just crack a can of tuna and eat that. To be honest, the thing I do these days is when I actually get a rest day, I'm so knackered and so old that I just literally lay in bed on my phone and don't get out of bed, even though I don't sleep at all. Just literally sit there thinking I've got no reason to get out of this bed whatsoever, and just sit there for like 5 hours.
Really?
On Discord and Twitter. Not quite 5 hours, but a long time, and just think like, what is the point of dragging my sorry ass out of bed?
And just eat tuna out of the tin. I can imagine now you've got like tins of tuna right by the side of your bed, and you're just eating tuna straight from the tin in bed, so you don't have to move anywhere.
Cat absolutely doing my head in, like going mental next to me. Yeah.
Jason Manners, pancakes with beans on. Jason, you're banned. What the hell is that? Pancakes with jeans. Brownie says, "Here's one for you. Toilet paper over under." I can't ask that one. Look, I'm not going to ask you that one. I did have a change of style after an incident about 20 years ago, but I won't go any more into that. Skyflyer can't beat a lovely single malt this time of year. Johnny Walker Black Label. Joseph Robinson, favourite drink, tomato sauce. Kept in the fridge. I was not talking about a drink there, but yeah. Thank you.
It's only in the fridge once it's been opened.
Yes.
That's what it says on it, doesn't it?
I think it does, yeah. I've been converted, though. I used to think it was madness. Mine was always in the cupboard. But now it's got to be in the fridge now. Yeah, definitely.
Pretty sure it says it on it. If you have a look, once open, keep in the fridge, or I might have made that up.
I think you're right. Up to like 3 weeks or 6 weeks or something. Anyway, this is what we brought you on for, mate. I know you're okay at Sky. We were more interested in your tuna eating habits as you just kind of lie in your own wherever in bed. That's the real festa. That's the one. That's the real content here. Okay. That is it from us for this week. Thank you so much, Luke. Been an absolute pleasure as usual having you on. Many congratulations on your fantastic season. Thanks for your insight. Thanks for your chat. Thanks for opening up about your fetish of tuna out of the can and everything else. Where can people get hold of you?
Just Twitter, I guess, at dis, which is D1S, I think, _FPL. I'm not sure because I'd never actually look at my own handle, but I'm pretty sure that's where you can find me. And you've got a podcast you still do, is that right? Yeah, we do when we can be bothered, essentially, at Inspected Goals. If you go on Twitter and want to look up, it does FPL, obviously, mainly. Well, solely. I don't know why I said that. But if you're interested in that, then come check it out. I think Ben Krellin's the biggest pull on there when he occasionally turns up. So, yeah, we'll try and get a few of those going over New Year when we can be bothered. I can drag myself out of my tuna-infested bed. Indeed. My handle on Twitter is at @FFH_Fergi. If you like what you watched, please press the like button. Remember to subscribe in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. And if you enjoyed your listen, please rate the podcast versions and leave some comments. We'll be back sometime next week after Christmas with Paul previewing Sky Gameweek 21. I suspect we'll also maybe touch on the overhaul season. There's only a couple of days to go until then. In the meantime, we hope you have a great Game Week 20, a fantastic and peaceful Christmas. Goodbye for now.